interspecific hybridization. It's kind of complex for this subject, but Dr. Funk did something that they thought was impossible. So we wanted our own version of Dr. Funk's work. And he said, it took me 10 years to create a Delphi. It will take at least 7 or 8 years to do this again. I don't think your program can wait that long, and I think it's the wrong direction anyway. And my father said, well, what can we do? We can't wait that long. He said, well, I want you to look at Festuca rundinacea, which is tall fescue. And we said, well, tall fescue is kind of a weed. Nobody wants that in their lawn. And he said, I want you to come to my greenhouse. I want to show you something. Now, Dr. Funk was already known as an authority worldwide. And by the way, this is in the late 80s this happened, about 86. I'm sorry. It was about 83, because 86 we officially opened Cascade. He brought us into the greenhouse, and on 2 sawhorses and some wooden planks, there were 46 plants in clay pots, and they were the ugliest looking plants you can imagine. And I was a young guy then, and maybe young and stupid. And I said to Dr. Funk, those plants are these are ugly. Nobody would want these in their lawn. And he looked at me, and right away I knew I'd said too much. He said, Barry, you're asking Dr. Funk the wrong question. You should ask Dr. Funk, why is he interested, and where do these plants come from? So I was smart enough to know to shut up and ask those questions. And my father was there, and he was kind of staring me down at this point. He instead of answering, he took a leaf, and he ripped the leaf off. And back then we were dealing with microscopes, and he put the leaf on a glass slide, put it under a microscope, and then he said, take a look at this leaf under magnification. So we started to look, and he said, what do you see? And my father, who looked first, said, I don't see anything. I see some lines. He doesn't have great vision. He'd take his glasses off. And he says, Dr. Funk said, well, Barry, do the lines form a pattern? And eventually my father said, yes, it looks like a box. Reed said, you're not looking close enough. And then my father said, yes, it's a hexagon. It's 6-sided. And he said, exactly. What does that remind you of? And my father, was sort of grasping at straws for a minute. And then he came to him. He said, Dr. Funk, it looks like a honeycomb. He said, exactly. That's what it is. He says, you were looking at a grass that developed an adaptive trait to survive extreme heat, in this case. Now ask me where it came from. And so we did. He said, this was sent to me from an oasis on the edge of the Sahara Desert in the border country between Morocco and Algeria. He said, a place where tall fescue should not be able to live. And I said, well, what would it be doing in the desert? He said, remember, Festuca rundinacea is native to the Mediterranean basin. He said it was probably an animal feed, carried in a camel caravan, hundreds of years ago across North Africa, and, somehow established itself. But because it's deeply rooted, because tall fescue will put down at least a 4-foot root system, and because of this waxy cuticle coating that lowers evapotranspiration, so the plant acts like a camel, preserves moisture, you've got a breakthrough here that nature has given you this opportunity. Now, so then he said, and you said they were ugly. That's not what breeders do. Breeders take that trait and try to breed it into something that looks better. And that was what we call the Black Beauty breakthrough. Now, he gave us those plants exclusively for about 5 years. We were allowed to have them. Then they would have to go to other people. But in that time frame, there was another discovery made. It was made in a park in Marquette, Michigan. So if you know anything about Michigan, that's at the top of the peninsula. It is very, very cold in Marquette, Michigan.
It's actually north of Wisconsin.
Yes, it is. It is very high up. And there was another Festuca rundinacea discovered. It was very dark green in color, but it turns out it had the waxy cuticle coating. We didn't realize there would be anything in North America like this, but we found it. The plant breeders, assisted by Dr. Funk initially, but the final work was done by our people, they crossed these two lines. So the Black Beauty that was released, and it was released in 1993, it was called EA, Earlier Rundination, meaning it emerged faster it produced its seed faster. It was planted as an experiment by a sod grower named Fred Patillo in North Carolina, right on the grounds of the Biltmore estate. And we probably would have never realized what we had, but just by chance, because frankly, I gave it to Fred, and I said, Fred, please don't mix this with anything. They tell me it's special. Make sure it gets planted. So, but I kind of forgot about it because, you're busy in your business. I was there a year later, and I was about to leave. I was about to go back to the airport, and just then a young man named David Bradley, who was Fred Patillo's son-in-law, comes rushing into the room. Did you show Barry the picture? And Fred said, oh, I forgot, but Barry's late for his plane. No. I set up the projector in the other room. You've got to look at this. So we trooped into the other room. He turns on the projector, and here I'm looking at a field from what looks like thousands of feet up that has a light green bullseye in the middle of it with dark green grass around it. And I thought, they're going to ask me to identify a disease with an aerial shot. I have no clue what I'm looking at. I thought I was going to be embarrassed. And before I had to speak, David said, Barry, that's that grass you gave us. I said, well, why is it light green in the middle? He said, well, I ran out of seed, and I went and got the Montauk Tolfescu and finished the field off. And that explained the light green color. I said, well, how did you get an aerial shot? And then Fred explained that his sister, who worked for National Geographic, who just returned from a trip to Africa, was hired by the Biltmore estate to take these fall foliage pictures, was flying over the estate and saw this field, thought it was unusual, and snapped 4 shots from the seat of the plane. And that's how we knew we had something like nobody else had. And that was the beginning. Then we hadn't actually gone to the field. I went to the field, and I thought, wow, this is different. So that was the beginning of Black Beauty. That was 6 generations ago. There have been 6, distinct generations since Onyx.
Of the Black Beauty.
Of the Black Beauty line. So it continues to improve. The Black Beauty, it was beautiful. It was dramatic back then. But if you saw Onyx compared to Tara or Toltec today, some of the newer material, you would say, well, that Onyx isn't very good looking, but that's the benefit of plant breeding. So it's there is nothing like it. So whenever people say, well, we have something similar, we have Tolfescus in our mixes, those are not the same thing. They are Festuca rundinacea, but they are all based on the K31 line of plant breeding. K31 is native to North America. Our plant breeders and so the universities have discovered 13 branches to the family tree Festuca rundinacea. So far, there's probably more. We're breeding on 2 distinct lines that have nothing to do with the K31 line. That's why everybody else's Tolfescus are kind of clunking. People don't like Tolfescu. When you say it's Tolfescu, they say, oh, I don't want that. That's a pasture grass. That's a backyard grass. Don't put that in my lawn. That's because they remember K31. Ours are nothing like that.
Great. So, with Black Beauty today and how it compares to other breeds of grass seed, whether it's, ryegrass or whatever that be, what are some of the benefits, that come along with using Black Beauty Tolfescu in your yard?
Well, species diversity. If you're going to have a great lawn, you want more than one variety in it. As good as Black Beauty is, it doesn't have a rhizoming root system. So if you have a bare spot, you want that bare spot to fill in, well, then you'd like some bluegrass in the mixture. Black Beauty varieties germinate pretty quickly, but not as quickly as perennial ryegrass. So if you're afraid of a washout, it's nice to have a little ryegrass in the mixture, but not just any ryegrass. You have to breed the ryegrass and the bluegrass to all look the same, because the homeowner doesn't want one grass of one color, one of another, one growing at a different rate. If you put annual ryegrass in your lawn, it will grow quick, and you'll mow it, and then it will grow about 2 inches higher than the rest of the grass, and that's a contaminant. The definition of a weed is something in a place you don't want it, a plant where you don't want it to be. Well, the wrong grass in a lawn would be considered a weed. You don't want it in that environment. Americans like dark green grass, and they like it to be uniform. That's why they like bluegrass. But Black Beauty looks like bluegrass, but doesn't have the disease problems of bluegrass. Bluegrass is very important. I mean, we're not in any way talking it down. It is a key component. It is used by sod growers just as much as Black Beauty is. As a matter of fact, every single Black Beauty sod mixture grown by a sod grower will have a % of bluegrass in it, usually 5 to 10 to 15. They use it to knit the root system together so they can lift it. But what you're seeing with your eyes is primarily Black Beauty. So it makes sense as long as the grasses look the same. It's great to have Frontier perennial ryegrass in there because it's just as dark green as Black Beauty. It's great to have the right bluegrasses for knitting ability. And of course, because they're different species, genetically different plants, they get different diseases. So tall fescues get brown patch disease. It doesn't kill Black Beauty. It can happen though sometimes, but brown patch disease is not gotten by bluegrass, and bluegrasses get patch disease that like fusarium, which tall fescue doesn't get. So when you have more than one grass, it's much less likely you're going to get disease, and if you do, you're going to get it later and you're going to recover from it faster. So that's the advantage. The trick to breeding is to breed all the plants so that they have a similar appearance, but you're growing a lawn on a genetically broad base. It's important.
It's like diversification in your investment. So kind of like if you're investing in the stock market, you're picking a number of different companies so that you're diversified in risk.
Exactly. If you invest all in technology, it's great when Apple's doing well or Google or something, but they can take a hit and your investments will drop 20% in one day. So it's nice to invest a little in 3M or something too. So.
You've talked before about Black Beauty being the flagship seed brand that you have. What quality aspects of Black Beauty are out there? You mentioned a little bit about actual disease resistance or drought resistance. Can you talk to why it has those components or qualities to it?
So as far as what are the attributes, improved disease resistance, improved appearance, improved insect tolerance because of endophytes, which makes the plant... our plants contain an alkaloid that makes them naturally insect resistant, so you have to use less chemicals to achieve the same goal. That's primarily for surface feeding insects like chinch bugs. If you stop trying to improve, then you won't, and your grass eventually will fail. We don't stick with a generation or specific variety just because we have it in production. I mentioned that we're 6 generations in, so the onyx isn't even grown anymore. Black Magic isn't grown anymore because we've improved them. The attributes, why are we trying to improve them? We're always trying to get a finer leaf, a uniform plant. We call it a vegetative plant. I mentioned before about yield. Varieties that yield a lot of seed on an acre of ground have a more decumbent growth habit, meaning that from the crown, which is the center, the heart of the plant, it's where the connection between the roots and the leaves, that's the crown. Plants that are heavy seed yielders will tend to grow sideways, open. So when you stand on your lawn with, say, K31 and you look straight down at the ground, you're going to see soil because they don't grow thick. A plant that has a vegetative growth habit grows thick, has a lot more, does tillers, grows thicker, a nicer, thicker canopy of grass. There's a challenge, though, when you're breeding a vegetative plant with a thicker canopy where the leaves touch each other. It's much easier for the disease mycelia to move from leaf to leaf to leaf when it's hot and humid out. So you have to breed and plants are just like people, except the time frame with people maybe is a little bit longer. But when you're young, if you get a little bit of exercise and eat reasonably well and maybe don't smoke too much, you're pretty healthy. You recover quickly. But as you get older, you get more diseases. You don't recover as quickly. And eventually, you usually die of one of those diseases. plants.